Right.
Right.
Yeah.
My biggest question
Yeah.
is we've just sent £54 million to France.
Yeah.
And I want to know who is paying for that,
Yeah.
who is paying for the accommodation for the asylum seekers, 3 meals a day,
Pocket money.
pocket money. Who's paying for that? Could you tell me?
Yeah, it's taxpayers' money, so we're paying for that.
So we're all paying for that.
Yeah, so the money that goes to France, we've given money to the French authorities police their own territory. I think, we wouldn't, if it's the other way around, we wouldn't expect the French police to be policing our coastline. So we have an arrangement with the French authorities, and for them, we want them to put more resources on the front line to stop migrant crossings. I think this has been quite effective, but it's a very long stretch of coastline and it needs more resource. So we've come to an arrangement with them. It's partly funded by them, partly funded by us. That allows more interceptions on the French coast before the boats get in the water. So I think that is a sensible thing to do.
So why did the French boats escort the dinghies into British waters, and why did the lifeboats and border force go into French waters and bring them over here?
Well, so in terms of why they're not escorted, I think there's a general consensus that forcible interception at sea is very dangerous. So if the best thing we can do is identify the boats before they get in the water. When they get in the water, if they're identified on the French side of the channel, we don't have the right to go and patrol or in the French waters. The French take the view that if a boat is in distress, they will rescue it, and if they do, they would take the people on board back to France. If it's not in distress, they won't forcibly intercept it because it's considered too dangerous to do.
Damon, I'm sorry.
No,
they don't take them back to France.
Let me explain this to you. If they get into trouble in French waters and the boat sank or something like that and they've rescued them, they would go back to France. They'd go back to the nearest port. That's what maritime law says. If they're on this side of the channel and the boat gets into distress and needs to be rescued, people rescue through the water, they come to England because that's the nearest port. What typically happens is once the boats are at sea, we don't forcibly intercept them. That's considered highly dangerous. The people on board often say if they thought they were going to be intercepted at sea, they would damage the boat, they would go into the water, they would put their lives at risk. So these boats are not necessarily being escorted across. What's happened is if they're identified, they're being monitored. And if they needed rescue, they would be rescued and they go to the nearest port. That's what's happening. They're not being escorted, they've been identified and they're being monitored. And in some ways, what we would want is if they're then landing in England, we would ideally want the border force there to intercept them when they land, so they're dealt with straight away.
Can I just now interrupt here?
Yeah.
I had an email from somebody who actually used to work for the RNLI who said the French are breaking their own maritime law because it states that all vessels within French waters within 6 miles of their coast must have a licensed operator or skipper if powered by an engine of more than 6 horsepower, a foghorn, life jackets for all on board, 142 newtons of buoyancy force of any kind of inflatable, 3 red hand flares, a torch, a bailer and a compass. That's maritime law, and they are breaking it.
So, it's also an offence to enter the country without documents to enter the country. But the situation we have at the moment is if they're at sea, they're not being forcibly intercepted at sea. So the question is then they're landing and claiming asylum, and that's why we're introducing this new legislation to try and change the law on this, to put the law on our side, because we don't have the powers necessarily to stop them. It's not necessarily an offence to come and claim asylum as the law currently stands. So that's why we are going to change the law to say that this route shouldn't be a route to indefinite leave to remain. It would be an offence to come into the country this way. It's an offence to escort someone into the country this way if you're a people trafficker or similar. So that's why we're changing the law, to give us more power in this. The reason we want to change the law in this way, to create these powers, is to create a deterrent for people doing it in the first place. At the moment, I think too many people see this as a shortcut into the asylum system, and that's why they take these risks. Because they know as soon as they get here, they claim asylum and they go into the asylum system. So what we need to do is create disincentives for people to do it. We're trying to catch people at the borders with more security, catch people as they leave the coast. But for those that get into the water, when they arrive here, they go into the asylum system. So we want to say, well, if you come into the country this way, you've come into the country without unlawfully, and therefore you won't go into the same asylum system, the same processing system. You won't get indefinite leave to remain. And you face a much higher risk of potentially having committed an offence, coming to the country, which could lead to a prison sentence or being deported. So we need to stop people from making the journeys. That's what we're trying to do.
So can you just answer me this question then, Mr. Collins? Why our border force turning off their AIS transponders and doing this under the fly, under the radar, as it were?
Well, your sense, I'm not going to discuss operational matters with border force. I'm not in a position to do so.
No, but you have a hotline to Priti Patel.
Well,
you must know. She must be able. You must be able to. Ask
I'm not going to
question.
discuss detailed operational matters. I don't know where you've got that information from. I'm not in a position to say
Well, it was all
whether that
over
reflects
the
what's going on or
press.
not.
It was all over the press.
Well, I don't know whether that is a fair reflection of what of the situation as it stands at the moment. I'm not going to discuss detailed individual operational matters with Waterfield. I'm not in a position to do that. I can tell you what the policy is, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to change, why some things are happening as they are. But I'm not in a position to answer detailed questions on
But you do
operational
agree
matters.
that they are turning off their AIS transponders?
No, I don't agree with that.
Well, it's in the press.
Well,
It's all over the papers.
I don't know whether that is a fair reflection of what's going on. I'm not in a position to do that, and I think this is now becoming effectively an interview that you're recording, not a surgery appointment.
It's not an interview. It's for my own record.
It's a question as one of your constituents
So-
about why people are doing stuff which is allowing the thousands of immigrants to come into this country, and you say, I can't tell you.
No, what I'm saying to you is the situation stands at the moment is that we've committed considerable resources to monitoring migrant boats in the Channel and people as they try and enter the water on the French coast to try and stop people doing it. Once people are at sea, there's not a policy of forcible interception at sea. There's a policy of monitoring vessels. Sometimes vessels do get through. I've heard this, I know this has been the case. Vessels have crossed the channel undetected and landed on the coast, or been spotted by the fisherman or the lifeguard very close to the coast. So that does happen. Often happens because the vessels are so small that the radar doesn't effectively pick them up. So that does happen from time to time. Mostly they are spotted at sea. They are monitored, sometimes followed, and they land. We don't have a policy. Forcible interception at sea is very dangerous and very difficult to do. So what we need to do, if we want to sort this problem out, to stop this problem, well, in the short term, more resources on the French coast to stop people getting in the water. That will help. Beyond that, we need to change the law so that people don't see this as an easy route. Those are the issues at stake here, because it's a question of saying to people, don't try and get into the country in that way, because if you do, you won't get indefinite leave to remain. The chances are you may face charges for having entered the country illegally without documentation. And that's a good disincentive for people to do it. What I want, I think that's what you want, is to close this route off. I don't want to see these crossings taking place. And I think what the government's decided, after careful consideration of this, is that's going to require changes to the law to give us more legal power to create this disincentive. So, it's not that I'm not in a position to tell you what individual skippers are doing in individual boats at any one time. What I can say is there is effective monitoring of what's going on the Channel. Most people are intercepted by Border Force when they land pretty quickly, and they want to be. But to stop this happening, it's not about what happens at sea, it's about stopping people making the journey in the first place.
So how are you going to... So they come across, are you saying they're going to be put in prison?
Well, we're saying that it's an offence to enter the country without papers. So someone coming into the country that way, if they would face the risk that they could face a charge and a prison sentence for coming in that way. That would be a risk they would have. And we've also said that people who come into the country in that way, it wouldn't be grounds to claim to get indefinite leave to remain in the country. They may have a situation where they are here for a temporary period of time, but constantly being reassessed and constantly facing the risk of being returned to their country of origin. So that if someone wants to come to the UK as the appropriate safe country for them as a refugee, we want them to do that by going through the legal routes that are open to refugees to come to this country, which we create working with the United Nations, as other countries do as well. And actually quite a significant number of people from war zones, like in Syria and Iraq, have come to this country as refugees through that route. That's the way it should be done. What shouldn't happen is people just cross the channel in a small boat and go into the asylum system in that way. That where they've come from safe countries, they've come through safe countries, and they're leaving a safe country to do that, and they're entering the country illegally. We want to stop this happening because
France
it's
is a safe country.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So there's no need for them to make that journey. There's no need for them to make that journey. So we don't want them to do it because it's apart from the fact I think it's obviously concerning to people who live along the coast, have undocumented people just arriving every day, not knowing who they are. But it's also incredibly dangerous, and I don't want to see people. I don't want to see the migrants themselves drowning at sea because they're making this unnecessary and very dangerous journey.
Okay, I read your blog about the borders, but I think you've answered the questions. But as a local constituent, Napier Barracks has, as you know, has been set fire to. There's been arrests. I mean, they intimidate the local residents. I've spoken to many people that live on Royal Military Avenue that say they've spoken to security guards at Tesco saying that they come in and It's really quite intimidating up there. Have you personally heard from constituents of their concerns? Because Kent Online and Kent Live, both of them say, no, refugees welcome, refugees welcome. That is not the case.
So I've done 2 separate public forum meetings with the leader of the council and other local representatives to give residents the chance to bring forward their questions. I did in the early days have some specific concerns residents raised, which I took up with various authorities. I think it has been quite effectively policed. The Kent Police have done a good job, in terms of providing security there. I must admit, I do not have very many individual specific complaints from constituents about the behaviour that have come to me. Have people concerned about the fact it's there at all? And people, and I myself have spoken publicly about the fact I don't think it's appropriate to house that many people in the asylum system in a single site in a residential community. I don't think it is sensible to do that, and I think the experience of the last year has probably proven that to be the case, and I'd like the Home Office to close Napier Barracks down as soon as possible.
It should be closed down.
Do you worry about the fact that we don't know who these people are? We don't know if they're terrorists, we don't know anything about them, and there's been how many?
Nearly 9,000.
Nearly 9,000 come in. Do you not worry that sooner or later we're going to have another big incident with, like London Bridge or
Manchester Arena?
Well, I don't think it's wrong to say that because people are coming undocumented, they're coming undocumented because that means they are criminals. I don't think we can say that. I think it'd be wrong to say that. A lot of those sorts of atrocities you talked about in the past have been committed by people who were known to the security services, and for whatever reason they still went on and committed those crimes. They're largely people being monitored. For the people that are coming into this country to claim asylum, they have a massive vested interest in coming here peacefully and behaving peacefully, because that's what's required for them to get settled status. If they commit offences while they're here, then they risk not only a prison sentence but losing their asylum claim. So
we don't know anything about them. We don't know if they're criminals in their own
But I think it's wrong.
country.
It's wrong to say because of that, because they're undocumented. I think it's wrong to say we must assume therefore they're all terrorists. I think that is completely wrong.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, doesn't it worry you?
And what I'd say is I have confidence in our security services that if there is anyone, regardless of whether a British citizen or someone who's visiting this country, that our intelligence operations are good enough to be able to detect possible threats and people planning to commit crimes, and they intercept those things all the time. And the people who arrive in this country seeking to claim asylum, they have their asylum claim assessed, but they're largely people who, when they arrive, they want to be picked up. They want to be picked up by the authorities. They wait to be collected by the authorities. They want to go into the asylum system. They're not people who are just disappearing off into the night.
Can I ask you another question? When they claim to be 16 or under 18, they go into the care of the local authority.
Yes.
And they become looked after children.
Can you just explain to Damian that you used to work
Yeah,
for
I'm a
Kent
social
County
worker.
Council?
Yeah.
For Kent County
That's right,
Council,
yeah,
I used
yeah.
to be, right?
So you used to
So
work
they-
with migrants.
Shush. So they become looked after children.
Yeah.
Now, if a social worker has doubts that they are 18, you have to ask for an age assessment, Merton compliant age assessment. Now, that takes 2 social workers, an interpreter, and what do you call them? Adult. What's it called?
Appropriate adult.
Appropriate adult for each one, and that takes hours, and then that could be 3 to 4 days, right? Now we have how many? So how do you think? How are they going to find all these social workers to do this job, to age assess them, and interpreters, and appropriate adults for each single one asylum seeker who claims he's under 18?
Well, it can be very difficult to assess the real age of someone who's not documented. That is the problem. So we will err on the side of saying if someone says they're underage, they look underage, they'll be treated as a child rather than as an adult, which they would be when they're 18. People can still have their cases reassessed when they become 18, though. And there can be then a question about whether someone is returned to their country of origin once they reach 18 because they're no longer considered vulnerable as a child. Sometimes they stay, sometimes people have gone back. So that still happens. But
No, I'll tell you what happens. They take their claim to court. They take their claims to court, and they usually get heard in the courts.
But I would say I think it's right that we treat unaccompanied children differently than we treat adults. I think that is right. I mean, these are unaccompanied children. They're not here with their families. You know.
I did a Freedom of Information request from the 1st of January to the 1st of June. Do you know how many unaccompanied children under the age of 18 that I got back on the Freedom of Information? Children, unaccompanied, 24. 24. The majority in your blog as well said that last year, 83% of them are young men between 18 and 39, 74%.
That's from the small boat crossings, yeah.
But you see, they are men.
But because of from the small boat crossing, very few children that come across the channel. There may be people that have entered the country differently to claim asylum, and in fact, most overall this year, asylum numbers are down across the whole country. Not in the Channel, but across the whole country, because most people, when they claim asylum in this country, do so at Heathrow Airport. They don't do it crossing the Channel. Now, what we've seen is because of the pandemic and other things, a lot more people are now making this journey across the Channel. Very few children make that journey. That's why those high percentage figures are for young men. It tends to be young men that make the journeys in the small boats.
Have you been down to the docks yourself?
Yes.
Have you been to Napier Barracks?
Yes.
So why is Priti Patel not? She's been to the docks. Why has she not been to Napier?
She has made local visits, and she's had.
She's not been to Napier Barracks.
No, but we have very.
She's the Home Secretary, Damian.
We're very
Mr.
close.
Collins.
I don't agree with the policy, but there's been very close cooperation between the Home Office and the local authorities on the.
But she's been called upon by MPs to visit Napier Barracks.
Okay. She is doing her job as Home Secretary. I don't agree with this policy, but I think that is the question is the interaction with the Home Office. I think has been very strong with the local authorities. But my message to the Home Office and to her, and I've met with her directly, as has the leader of the local council, to talk about this matter with her personally. And we were both very clear that we felt that this was the wrong decision to have taken, and that when their lease on Napier Barracks expires in September, that we want it to close at that point. Obviously, Napier can't be a permanent facility because it is ultimately the site has been acquired by Taylor Wimpey and will be redeveloped for housing, but probably not for another year or two.
My final question, and you your final question. My final question, Damian, Mr. Collins, sorry for calling you Damian, is that Stade Court Hotel has been booked out now until the end of September. We went down to Stade Court Hotel in Hythe because my mum lives in Hythe. I live down there in Folkestone. Stade Court Hotel is completely booked.
Yeah.
All of the windows are open. You can see all of the migrants at the windows. You've got security on the doors. People don't know what is going on down there. Do you agree that the Home Office should be booking out hotels? So when people in this pandemic want to have a staycation, want to go to the coast, so say someone from like Bristol wants to come to Hythe, can't actually go there because of all of these migrants.
I've raised with the Home Office Minister, the Minister of Immigration, about the situation at Stade Court Hotel. I was made aware of it the day before yesterday, and I've raised this with him, that I don't think it's appropriate to use seafront hotels in the summer season to accommodate asylum seekers. So, and I hope that they there's something they can do to stop this. That is my position. I don't think the Stade Court is an appropriate hotel for them to use, given its location on the seafront.
Your final question.
Well, I think my final question to you is: are you happy with this situation as MP for this?
Well, I think, and the Home Secretary thinks this too, the asylum system is broken. It takes too long to process claims. That means we have too many people being accommodated in it at any one time. And the situation, I think, the legal situation that has enabled small boat crossings to happen without us being able to effectively challenge people that come into the country that way isn't working. And that's why we're passing new legislation to reform the system. We need to stop the small boat crossings. We need to process applications much faster, and we need we shouldn't be in the situation where we have so many people being held in the asylum system at any one time. There are legitimate people who should claim asylum in this country.
I know.
And the settled routes, the settled route scheme, which from Syria and Iraq, countries like that, that's tens of thousands of people are coming to the country legally in that way. So sometimes it's portrayed as being a system that doesn't work and is effectively closed. It's not. People successfully make genuine asylum claims in that way, and that's what we want to see in the future. So, but I think the government's recognised it requires some changes to the law to give us the power to do that.
Can I just ask you one last thing? Why doesn't Boris Johnson come on the television and talk to people about this crisis?
Well, I think he has done. I mean, I think the issue is, and I think people are quite right in saying this. They'll probably challenge any minister and say, "Well, that's all well and good, but as soon as until I see the boat stopping coming over, then I won't take any comfort from what you say until it stops." And therefore, I think that the government are absolutely determined to see this stop now. But and I think until it does,
he needs to come out and talk to the British public about this crisis.
Well, I believe he has. And I've met with Boris Johnson. I've not only brought this up with him; he's brought it up with me as well. So I think, and I would not say that Boris Johnson and Priti Patel lack any determination at all on this issue. I think what they've recognised is that in order to give us the control that we want and to stop these small boat crossings, it's going to require not just investing in patrolling resources and security resources, it's going to require changing the law.